He wasn't asking for help. He wasn't asking for mercy. He was just sitting there waiting for the bus, thinking about how his shoulder still ached from the VA appointment and how he'd probably missed lunch again. Yeah, that's how ordinary it was. Late afternoon heat clinging to everything Oak Ridge Avenue, buzzing the way it always does. Cars rolling by like nothing in the world was about to change. Isaiah Brooks sat in his wheelchair at the corner, hands resting where they always rested, eyes on the road, counting time the way you do when you've learned that being early is safer than being rushed. 7 minutes until the bus, maybe 8, plenty of time. And then the patrol car slowed down. You know that sound, right? Tires easing up, engine dropping just a notch like something's deciding whether you matter. Isaiah noticed it, but didn't react. When you've lived like he has, you don't jump every time a cop looks your way. You just stay still and hope stillness is enough. The car stopped anyway. Door opened. Boots hit pavement. Hey, you. Step over here. Isaiah turned his head, calm, polite, because that's how you survive these moments. I'm just waiting for the Route 12, he said. I just left the hospital. Officer Holloway stood there, white, mid-40s, that casual stance, like nothing bad could possibly come from him. You match the description of a suspect, he said, already decided. That familiar drop hit Isaiah's chest. Not fear exactly, more like, here we go again. I don't think so, Isaiah replied. I've been sitting here the whole time. Holloway squinted, leaned closer. Stand up. And for a second, Isaiah honestly thought he misheard him, because who says that to a man in a wheelchair? I can't, Isaiah said. I'm paralyzed from the waist down. 14 years. That should have been it. That should have been the end. Instead, Holloway smiled just a little, like he'd heard a bad joke. You expect me to believe that Isaiah felt heat rise in his neck. I'm a veteran. Combat injury. My papers are in my bag. Holloway waved it off. I don't need papers. I need compliance. Around them, the street slowed, people pausing without realizing why a teenager already lifting his phone, instincts sharper than adults sometimes. I'm not resisting, Isaiah said, keeping his voice steady even though his heart was pounding. I physically can't do what you're asking. Holloway's voice dropped colder now. Funny how that works. Cops show up, everybody suddenly can't move. That one hurt not because it was clever, but because it erased everything Isaiah had survived to be sitting there breathing. Officer, Isaiah said quietly, please don't touch the chair. If you pull me out, I'm going to fall. Holloway didn't answer. He stepped behind the wheelchair, hands closing around the handles, firm, confident, like the chair was just in his way. If you don't stand up, he said loudly so everyone could hear, I'll help you out of it. Time stretched thin. Isaiah's chest tightened. Please, he said. And yeah, his voice cracked. I can't catch myself. The chair jerked back hard, twisted sideways, metal scraping concrete balance, gone in an instant. Isaiah felt the world tilt and then slam. His shoulder hit first, a dull crack that echoed louder than it should have, his phone sliding away, medical papers bursting out across the sidewalk like proof no one wanted to read. For a moment he couldn't breathe, couldn't move, just stared at the sky, knowing his legs wouldn't help him roll, knowing his arms were screaming, knowing he was completely exposed. Someone yelled, "What the hell are you doing?" But the teenager didn't lower the phone. Yeah, that happened. It kept streaming. Holloway crouched, yanked Isaiah's arms behind his back, pain exploding through his shoulders, metal cuffs snapping shut. Resisting arrest, Holloway muttered like muscle memory. I told you. Isaiah gasped. I can't move. Holloway stood and spoke into his radio. Suspect secured. Uncooperative. A lie said calmly, turning real in the system. 2 patrol cars pulled up minutes later. Officers stepped out and froze. A black man, handcuffed on hot pavement, a wheelchair tipped over, nearby, phones everywhere. What happened, one asked. Holloway answered fast, smooth. Matched a suspect, refused commands, faked a disability. One officer knelt by Isaiah, noticed the hospital wristband. Another picked up a paper, the VA seal, clear as day. Sir, the officer asked gently, can you stand? Isaiah swallowed. No, I never could. The officer stood, turned to Holloway. These records are legit. Holloway shook his head. Anyone can print papers. Then a woman stepped forward. I witnessed everything. I'm a civil rights attorney. He told you he was paralyzed. You chose not to believe him. The crowd shifted, voices rising. Take the cuffs off him. You assaulted a disabled man. The officers looked at each other. Reality had caught up cameras everywhere, nowhere to hide. They removed the cuffs. Isaiah's wrists were raw, bleeding a little. They helped him back into his chair carefully now, apologizing quietly. Every movement hurt, but Isaiah stayed silent. He'd learned complaining never changed much. Holloway stood off to the side, jaw tight, repeating he'd followed procedure. But by that night, the video was everywhere. By morning, it was national news. A paralyzed veteran dragged from his wheelchair in daylight. Holloway was suspended. Investigations started. And then the past spilled out complaint after complaint, use of force, racial profiling threats, dismissed as misunderstandings. 16 prior complaints, most from people of color, all brushed aside. Doctors confirmed Isaiah's injuries, torn ligaments, months of recovery, and for someone who lives on his arms, that's everything. Worse were the nights, the flashbacks, the sound of metal scraping concrete, the feeling of being powerless all over again. The Justice Department stepped in. Federal investigators arrived. Data was reviewed, patterns exposed. Holloway was fired, then charged with assault and abuse of authority. Isaiah filed a civil lawsuit. The city pushed back, at first then hesitated. The evidence was overwhelming, a jury would see it in minutes. The settlement came quietly, $14.8 million. People asked Isaiah how it felt, if it made him whole. He shook his head. "Money doesn't give you dignity," he said. "It just proves it was taken." Instead of disappearing, Isaiah spoke out city council meetings, law schools, veteran groups, telling the story without rage, without exaggeration, just facts. "If this can happen to me," he said, "once it can happen to anyone, especially the ones without cameras." The department announced reforms, training, oversight, promises. You know what I mean. Time will tell. What stayed wasn't the money. It was the image, a man on the ground, a wheelchair tipped over, phones raised like mirrors, the system couldn't look away from. Justice didn't come because the system chose to be good. It came because someone recorded it, because someone said, "I saw that." So here's the real question. How many stories like this never get told? How many people were hurt in silence because nobody pressed record or because everyone looked away? And if you've ever seen something like this, if you've lived it, witnessed it, or stepped in, tell us in the comments. Argue with us if you want. Because the next person on the ground could be anyone, and the truth might depend on who decides not to turn away.